Hey everyone, Connor here, and I wanted to read my great-grandmother's account of my family escaping Germany in World War II and going to America. So let's start. When my husband Bruno and I were married, my mother wanted to come live with us. I told her, let us have the first year by ourselves to get to know one another, and the second year she could come and stay. My husband owned a paint factory in Heidingsfeld near Würzburg. When the Nazis took over, they came to say, since you are Jews, you cannot own the factory. But when the inventory was done, to prevent my husband from being part of the negotiations, they took him to prison. That was January 31st. They said he would be out as soon as the arrangements had been worked out to transfer ownership. Several months went by and he didn't come home. Our son Ernie was 3. They froze our accounts, so I had no money to buy food or clothing or pay the rent. I had to go each time and beg for money. Once I needed to buy shoes for Ernie, and they asked why. Why? I said, because he's a child and his feet are growing. They did their best to humiliate you. The officials came and asked me to sign papers having to do with the sale of the factory. I said I knew nothing about the factory, and they would have to bring my husband home from prison if they wanted a signature. Of course, I did know about the factory and the details, but I wasn't going to tell them I did. I had applied for numbers to go to the United States. You had to have a number and then wait until you were called. We had been waiting for quite a long time, and I wouldn't go unless we were all together. When my husband was long overdue to come home, I went to the local officials to ask where he was and when he would be coming. That was in May. Knowing it had been several months, they said, we don't feed Jews that long. They said they had no information and would have to wait for an answer from Berlin. I had a friend in Berlin. I called her and said only, do you have an extra bed? I didn't dare tell her over the phone that I was coming because Jews were not allowed to travel, but she understood and said yes. And since my mother was there at home to look after Ernie, I went. I took a train and they met me at the station. The next day, my friend's husband drove me down to the Gestapo building, where I could find out about Bruno. A large sign over the door said, Jews enter here at risk of your life. My friend said, you can't go in there. You mustn't go in there. I said, I will. What was I to do? So finally, after driving around and around, he let me out a block from the door, and I went in under that terrible sign. The officials got out a large book that had an R on the front to look for my husband's name, Riesenfeld. Over and over, they said there was no Riesenfeld listed, nor was there an H. Brower & Co., our relative who founded the company. I told them he was taken on the 31st of January. Look at that date and see if his name isn't there, I said. When they checked that page, a name had been erased. I said, there, you did have a name there. What has happened? We went to a shelf where there were stacks of papers for prisoners taken since that date. I saw a pink slip far down the stack and noted the slip said, release. Do it today. I showed them the slip, and when they pulled out the folder, it was Bruno's. He should have been released long ago, I said. Go home, and he will be there, they replied. Knowing it would take longer than they said, I spent another 2 days at my friend's family, then went home. He came from the prison, and we had a couple of months together. Then, early one morning, at 4:30, there was a knock on the door, and they took Bruno away to the concentration camp, to Buchenwald. I had applied for numbers to go to the United States. Again, the officials came and wanted money to pay the taxes for selling the factory. I said only my husband could do that, and he must be brought home from the camp to do that. I insisted, and eventually he was sent home, and the taxes were paid. No money ever came to us. I had become pregnant, and the baby was due in 2 weeks. We decided to leave and go to my sister-in-law's in Amsterdam. She had a permit to stay there, and wait there until our number was called to go to New York. We had to pack our things in 2 large boxes. The Nazis came to watch what we packed. We were not allowed to take anything valuable. They forbid me to take my jewelry, but they didn't notice the pieces I had pinned to the clothes I was packing. I had sterling silver place settings for 18. They said, why do you need that much silver? You can take 2 knives, 2 forks, and 2 teaspoons for you, your husband, and Ernie. I protested that the baby was expected in 2 weeks and we would need the same. But they said no, the baby was not eating. Before leaving Würzburg, I went to the shipping company and paid for these boxes to be sent to a holding company in Rotterdam, and from there to New York once we had the date we were leaving Holland, if ever. We boarded the train. It was April. We arrived during the night at the Dutch border. When the customs man came through the train, he asked to see our papers. Jews, he said. Get off the train. Ernie was in his pajamas, wrapped in a blanket. What could we do but gather our belongings and get off? On the platform, the man said, You can get the next train. It was freezing cold. Some 12 hours later, we got on the next train. I had called my sister-in-law and told her we would arrive later. We didn't say we were put off. She met us at the station in Amsterdam. She arranged for us to stay at the home of a friend of hers, a teacher, and because we were not allowed to work or earn any money, she paid all of our expenses for the 11 months we were there. Our second son, Jimmy, was born 2 weeks after we arrived. When finally our number came up and we could leave, we wanted her to come with us, and she could have, but she was a doctor and she had a patient due to have a baby soon, and she didn't want to leave her. She was taken away later and died in the concentration camp. My mother also, who refused absolutely to come with us, died later in a concentration camp. Before leaving, I needed to go to Rotterdam to arrange the release of our boxes of belongings so they could be sent to New York. But when I got there, they explained I needed to pay for the shipment to New York, that our payment records had expired. I was unbelieving. How could we pay when we had no money? He said I would have to sell some of the goods in order to pay for what I wanted to send. And because everyone was put in the same situation, goods were not going for much money. I looked into the boxes and took the linens because I knew I could use the tablecloths for sheets if I had to, and I took the crib and the baby things. That was all I could afford to pay to have shipped. So that's what we had when we arrived. Then we boarded the last boat, leaving Europe for the US. So she wrote that in 2001, and she was 93 at the time. She would go on to live for another 10 years. She died when she was 103, and we called her Omi. And she really was something else, and honestly, I feel like if I could have just, 1/100th of the willpower and the strength she had, then I'll be okay in life, because without her, I would definitely never have been born, because she got my family out. So thank you, Omi, and thanks for much less of a thanks, but thank you also for watching my video, and have a good one.